Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munhoz takes place this weekend in the co-main event of UFC 265, Lewis versus Gane, and I can't wait for this bantamweight co-main event. A great matchup in the bantamweight division, two top 10 contenders. Jose Aldo's even in the top 5, number 5 in the bantamweight division versus number 9 Pedro Munhoz. An amazing matchup between two great Brazilian bantamweights. Both guys 34 years of age. They need this win desperately. In my opinion, this will be both of their last chances to get towards the title picture maybe one more time. Pedro Munhoz, Jose Aldo, great matchup. Let's talk about it. First of all, before we talk about the matchup though, I know I just said let's talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about it for a second. I need to speak about something else before I give my prediction. Why on earth is Pedro Munhoz ranked number 9? I don't understand. He clearly did not lose to Frankie Edgar. He was clearly robbed in what is, in my opinion, one of the worst decisions of all time. He should not have lost that fight to Frankie Edgar. I thought he won 4 rounds to 1. And 3 rounds to 2 to Pedro Munhoz is, in my opinion, a bad decision as well. Pedro Munhoz won that fight against Frankie Edgar. I don't understand why Pedro Munhoz is held back by Frankie Edgar because he lost to him, but not the other way, which is the fact that Garbrandt and Rob Font aren't held back by the fact that Pedro Munhoz beat them. I don't get it. Pedro Munhoz, in my opinion, should be ranked number 4 right now in the bantamweight division. If that decision was called correctly against Frankie Edgar, he would be number 4 right now in the bantamweight division. He's beaten Cody Garbrandt by first round KO. He's beaten Rob Font by first round submission. Pedro Munhoz is criminally underrated. In my opinion, this is 2 top 5 bantamweights. Jose Aldo, Corey Sandhagen. I mean, Aldo isn't held back by his bad decision loss to Marlon Moraes in some people's eyes, even though that wasn't even that bad of a decision. But Munhoz gets dragged down the rankings with Frankie Edgar as he loses. So unfair. Let's talk about the matchup in general. I do believe that Jose Aldo is going to get the job done against Pedro Munhoz. Now, I was maybe picking Pedro Munhoz for a bit of a time. I didn't mind his chances out there. I thought maybe, you know what, if he goes out there, utilizes those calf kicks, Aldo's not going to be too okay with them, and maybe Munhoz could push a pace and eventually get the better of Aldo. I said if it was a 5-rounder, Munhoz would definitely win. In a 3-rounder, Munhoz might be able to get it done towards the end of the second and then get himself the 3rd round. But I believe that Jose Aldo is going to be good enough to secure himself those first 2 rounds. And that's all it comes down to. And first of all, it's a 3-round bout in the co-main event of a pay-per-view. I know normally now they do 5-round feature fights like Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards, but I had to check. This is a 3-round bout. Aldo in a 3-rounder. I mean, 3-round Aldo exists for a reason as a mythological fighter. He is on another level when he doesn't have to worry about those extra 2 championship rounds where he always gasses out without failure. However, he does slow down sometimes in 3-rounders. The only man to really beat Aldo, other than I guess Marlon Moraes in some people's eyes, including mine by the way, the only guy to really beat a great Aldo on a 3-rounder and clearly beat him is Alexander Volkanovski. He picked apart Aldo for 3 rounds, just completely neutralized him and outclassed him in every way whatsoever. But I don't believe Pedro Munhoz is going to be able to do that to Jose Aldo in a 3-rounder. I think maybe Pedro Munhoz will have an amazing 3rd round and start to look really good, and Aldo's going to be breathing heavy and he's going to be looking up at the clock and he's going to be trying to clinch with Munhoz against the cage and just trying to avoid the fight in general against Pedro Munhoz. I see a stand-up war back and forth, but I think Aldo can get himself the first 2 rounds, and that's all it comes down to. Can Aldo get those first 2 rounds? I believe he can, and I believe he will against Pedro Munhoz. Main reason being, don't get me wrong, I think Aldo's very skillful, and I think he's more skillful maybe on the striking department than Pedro Munhoz. But the main reason is, Aldo is... I've watched a couple of his fights recently. I watched his fight against Piotr Jan. I've watched his fights also in division against Marlon Moraes as well. Rewatched that one. I still believe that Marlon Moraes has an argument to win that one in the 3rd round. But either way, he's massive. He's a giant weight bully for the bantamweight division. And Pedro Munhoz looks like a flyweight compared to Jose Aldo. And will look like a flyweight compared to Jose Aldo this weekend, in my opinion. Aldo is too big for him. He's massive. 5'7" compared to 5'6". I think there's going to be more of a height disadvantage than that. I think Aldo's going to be noticeably taller than Pedro Munhoz. He has a 5-inch reach advantage over Pedro Munhoz as well. Now I'm looking at the numbers. 5'7", 70-inch reach. Pretty ridiculous compared to the 5'6", 65-inch reach for Pedro Munhoz. And for Pedro Munhoz, I don't see him being able to outhook Jose Aldo in close quarters combat. I think Aldo's going to beat him there all the time, every time, and I think I can see him whipping those body hooks over and over and over again on Pedro Munhoz, and I think that's going to help him alleviate some of that pressure, because Pedro Munhoz sticks his chin down, starts swinging back and forth haymakers, tries to go after you, tries to catch you with some big bombs, sticks his chin down and gets scrappy. He's basically a bantamweight Wanderlei, in all honesty. Even still, Aldo's hooks to the body and his shots to the body in general, I think are going to provide a very worthy mechanism to stop the pressure of Pedro Munhoz, because once you get hit in that body, you don't want to pressure anymore, and this is something that Aljamain Sterling utilised against Pedro Munhoz in their bout, where Aljo outclassed him for 3 rounds, really. I mean, it was a competitive bout, don't get me wrong, and Pedro Munhoz had his moments, but Aljamain Sterling was able to withstand the pressure of Pedro Munhoz and eventually get the better of him over 3 rounds, and that was mainly because of his body work on Pedro Munhoz. He kept jabbing Pedro Munhoz in the body, he kept teeping Pedro Munhoz in the body, and it made Pedro not want to continue just wading into these shots, because when you're walking into body shots, first of all, you're walking, so you're not setting your stance and waiting and tensing up in the right way to not take them too badly. You're breathing in an inconsistent pattern, you're walking forward, you're out of stance, and you're walking into these body shots. I think Aldo's going to be able to dig him to the body against Pedro Munhoz, and I just don't see Munhoz having the capabilities to outstrike Jose Aldo, because I feel like you need straight shots to beat Jose Aldo. I know Conor McGregor caught him on a counter as Aldo rushed him, but I'm kind of wiping that from existence in my mind, in all honesty, and trying to find a way to beat Aldo, because that can just happen. You can get caught by a counter in the first few minutes if you're very, very reckless and emotional, which I don't see Aldo being here against Pedro Munhoz. I think you need straight shots to beat Aldo. You need straight shots. Jan started doing it. You saw that in the fight. Pedro Munhoz doesn't have that ability. He just swings hooks. He's not really the kind of guy to go 1-2 straight down the pipe and try and catch Aldo as he does some of his unorthodox head movement. Max Holloway did it for the first 2 rounds of both of their bouts, just stuck behind a jab, tried to work out Aldo, tried to make him use that head movement to see what he was planning on doing, then followed it up with that 1-2, and then a 1-2 again in the first fight, and then hurt him with it again in the second fight as well. Petr Yan realised he couldn't really trade hooks on the inside with Aldo. Aldo was cashing him with a couple of body shots. What did Petr Yan do? He started reaching and overextending almost with like a straight right hand to catch Aldo on the reverse, on the counter, as he tries to slip away from his combinations. I think Pedro Munhoz doesn't really have that ability, and if they're in close, Aldo's 5-inch reach advantage and boxing advantage in that close in general is going to be a huge factor. Now, maybe Pedro Munhoz could land that calf kick and wear down Jose Aldo, maybe. I don't believe so. I don't see it happening. I think Jose Aldo is going to be able to check those leg kicks, stay out the way of them as well. If Aldo's the guy who is known for years for destroying people's legs, I think he's at least learnt throughout that destruction of leg anatomy how to avoid his own ones being destroyed as well. Because if you get good at leg kicking, it means you're drilling leg kicks with someone in your camp. You're not just smashing leg kicks into a dummy and that's how good you've got. You've got to learn the timing. And I think him against Pedro Munhoz, I don't see him getting his legs chewed up. Maybe they do a little bit, but I don't see it happening to the extent that he did against Jimmy Rivera, where Aldo can't even walk anymore. If Edgar can learn how to ride with those kicks of Pedro Munhoz and not really feel them too badly, I think that Aldo can as well. He's much bigger. He's much bigger. He's a massive guy for the division. I think he's going to be too physically imposing. I don't see anything going on the ground here. Aldo won't get submitted anyway, in my opinion. Pedro Munhoz, maybe you could go for like an Imanari roll or jump a guillotine at one point when they're against a cage and go for some kind of Hail Mary submission attempt like that, but I don't see it happening. I see Jose Aldo beating him in a boxing fight, with maybe Munhoz chopping at the legs a couple of times, but Aldo I think is going to start chopping back. And I don't think Pedro Munhoz is going to want to chop at the legs too much, because Aldo's so quick and so explosive in that division. I can see him catching Munhoz on the chin early. I can see Aldo getting this one done. I just think he's far too technical compared to Pedro Munhoz. Both guys have got very similar stats, but Munhoz is just way higher on the output department because of how slow Aldo gets in those last 3 rounds. Other than that, Aldo's got a higher striking accuracy, and he's got better competition opponents as well, so that's higher accuracy against people with relatively better defense than people that Pedro Munhoz is taking on. He's got a way lower strikes absorbed per minute. In fact, Pedro Munhoz has a higher strikes absorbed per minute than landed per minute, 5.87 to 5.6. Aldo also has the same deal, but just way lower in both circumstances. The defense stats of Jose Aldo, 61%. Anything above 60 in the defense department is usually a very good stat line to have, especially in the bantamweight division when guys are so fast. Neither guy really shoots takedowns, and if they do, Aldo has way more accuracy than Munhoz. Defense-wise, Aldo's takedown defense is amazing. Munhoz doesn't really go for submissions. He kind of waits for you to sort of shoot on him. He's one of the Charles Oliveira type of jiu-jitsu guys. I know that doesn't really make sense now. So he's maybe more of like a Brian Ortega jiu-jitsu guy, where you have to shoot on him in order for him to be effective with the jiu-jitsu. He can't really just push you against a cage and take you down. It used to be the Oliveira example, but recently Oliveira has just been picking guys up and dunking them. The winner of this one, in my opinion, is next for Rob Font in the bantamweight division. Great matchup to make. The winner of this is going to be probably ranked number 5. Aldo will keep his number 5 ranking spot, or Munhoz will jump up and take that number 5 ranking spot 100%. There's no way they can continue to keep him this low in the rankings if he wins against Jose Aldo. And the winner of this one takes on Rob Font for a title shot. Makes sense to me. I think what they should do in the bantamweight division right now is Piotr Jan versus Aljamain Sterling, of course, is happening in October. Dillashaw versus the winner. Aljamain Sterling versus Sandhagen versus the loser. I'm not just assuming that it's Aljamain Sterling. The loser of Jan Sterling 2 will take on Corey Sandhagen. The winner will take on TJ Dillashaw. And then the winner of Rob Font versus the winner of Aldo Munhoz will then get the next title shot in the division. Or maybe if Corey Sandhagen completely obliterates Aljamain Sterling brutally in a redemption win by KO in the first round, he can get himself back on the title shot as well. But I think the winner of this one's going to earn a title elimination bout 100%. Munhoz should have already got a title shot. And I think Munhoz is one of the dark horses of the division. I just don't think a 3-rounder is a good thing for Munhoz, man. He takes a little bit of time to get going. He takes too long to get into his flow state towards the ends of those rounds where he's really starting to beat guys up and he's got them chopped down and he's invested in their legs. And I just see Aldo stunting his pressure with those body shots, those hard body shots. I mean, Aldo's got some of the nastiest body shots in the game. He's putting down guys like Jeremy Stevens with him. I think Munhoz is going to try pressuring, but as the rounds go on, you're going to see his elbows get nice and tucked, because he's starting to feel those body shots. He's going to start winding himself a little bit as well. And I think Aldo's going to cruise to a 29-28 unanimous decision win. Take on Rob Font afterwards. Maybe in a 5-rounder. That would be good to see, in all honesty, because here's the thing about Jose Aldo. He's very obviously avoiding 5-round fights. That's just every single aspect of Aldo's career is just to avoid 5-rounders. Like, he will literally say it out loud. I chose the co-main because I don't want to fight 5 rounds. Why would I? I don't do well in 5-round bouts, and that's people's only chance of beating me, typically. In a 3-rounder, Aldo's got a good chance to beat anyone. Aldo could beat Piotr Jan in a 3-rounder. He could. He could beat Dillashaw in a 3-rounder as well. I just want to see if Aldo wins this one. I think he has to fight for 5 rounds. Main event of a fight night. Jose Aldo, Rob Font. Winner of that one gets a title shot. They get their own spotlight on their own card. And I want to see Aldo go 5 rounds before I see him fight for a belt again. Because otherwise, if he just fights Rob Font for 3 rounds and somehow wins, I'm just going to say as soon as the title fight comes around, oh, it's 5 rounds and Aldo's going to lose because it's 5 rounds. That's just what I'll say. So I want there to be some kind of difference coming into a rematch potentially with Piotr Jan, or a fresh matchup with maybe Aljamain Sterling. If Jose Aldo wins this one, has to be 5 rounds. I need that question answered before I see him fight for the belt again. Hopefully he's improved. I just think he's too good for Munhoz. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. The loser of this one's going to be in a bad spot, but I guess they could maybe look for a matchup with Frankie Edgar, Dominic Cruz. There's a lot of good names they can go against. Rafael Assunção. Let's say Pedro Munhoz loses. I'm sure he would entertain that idea. Maybe even the loser of this one can look at a Sean O'Malley matchup just to put themselves right back in the spotlight. Who knows? But there's a lot of fun fights to make in the bantamweight division. Looking forward to it. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Jose Aldo, 29-28, winning the first 2 rounds, surviving the last round. Click that button up there. Like and subscribe. I'll see you later.